So you don't want to do the regular intro for this. So I'm going to throw the question at you. We just start speaking of offline. I recently had Rob McGeary on the podcast talking personal development, and he was talking about the benefits of no fap. You said before we got into this that you were pro fap. Now, is there a scientific reasoning behind this, or is this just really weird territory to start the episode off?
No, this is fine. It's like when I think personal development, I think about going to a seminar and learning how to speak better or learning how to read faster or be more organized. I don't understand where your penis comes into this equation. Like, you know what? I decided I wanted to be a better person, so I stopped touching my penis. Like, what? I don't get that. So I'm pro fap. I mean, that's something I've always done. Even if I'm married now, I still fap. So sometimes I fap 3 times a day. Even when I'm getting plenty of sex. It's just, I think that's a common man thing to do, and maybe a woman thing to do as well. I don't know, because I don't have a vagina, so I don't know how many times girls do that. So
yeah, I mean, do you find, like, have you done enough research on this yourself to realize there's performance benefits from the times where you fap more and fap less, like strength ratios, like the multiple times the squat goes up?
No, I mean, I have enough time on my hands looking at nutrition and exercise physiology and all that stuff. It's like, I wonder what would happen if I stopped jacking off for 30 days. Maybe I get like 0.3 kilos on my bench. Yeah, not worth it. So
so we're like, if you're going into sort of like the personal development route and finding out, rather than looking at who Luke was, because most people know who Luke was. You've done this 1,000 times, going from who Luke's becoming. What's your go-to things for like personal development, other than just studying a lot of nutrition stuff?
No, look, that's a good question. I'll tell you my secret. I read a lot of fantasy genre books. I find that fantasy and sci-fi, the nerds and the geeks have this shit all sorted out. So I can always find something about leadership or honor and loyalty and all that stuff. And even like, organization. If you read the books with an open mind, you'll see a lot of philosophy. You'll see a lot of leadership quality stuff. For instance, Dune, if you've ever read Dune, tons of leadership value in that book. If you've ever read one of my favorites, Sword of Truth series, there's a lot of philosophy on there, a lot of kind of anti-altruistic, take care of yourself before you take care of other people types of philosophy there, kind of like your pave your own way type of stuff. So that's the type of stuff that I look for. And I've tried the other books, like, I don't know if you go to the self-development section and there's a bazillion ones by a bunch of losers who have never done anything themselves. And now they're trying to tell you how to do that shit. And I find that they were just worthless. And I've found everything I needed to in fiction.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been a big reader. It's something I feel like I should do, because you see a lot of people going into, there's a common trend of people that are successful in business or anything, where they're often reading fiction becomes an important part of like just improving. You mentioned things about improving themselves as a person, but also improving themselves as a storyteller and communication skills and things like that from it. I mean, like you've often said, like before, turn this into a personal therapy session, but about your ADHD. Do you find it's been a tough ride to get into reading, being able to focus on something like that? Because I'm on the verge of going and finding out if I have adult onset ADHD, and one of the things I've always struggled with is reading. So how have you gotten into that, considering like the struggles that may have come from having that diagnosis?
I think a lot of the issues with ADD, well, there's some inherent benefits having ADD. When you're passionate about something, you can get ridiculously hyper focused. Bombs could be going off and you wouldn't even notice. So but there's some also negatives. You've got a lot of issues with impulse control. And before I take my medication in the morning, I'm very manic. And my wife can tell when I haven't taken it. She's like, "Have you taken your meds?" I'm like, "No, not yet. Oh, let's go do something fun." She's like, "Take your meds." I'm like, "Okay." And then 2 hours later, I'm at my computer like, "Okay, I've got focus. I can do this now. Cool." But I think because I'm 43, right? So I've had 43 years to learn how to channel this. And so a lot of it is being able to channel it into something you're passionate about, and which happens to be my career path. So it's nothing for me to sit here and do computer work for 12 hours a day or grab a book and study for 12 hours because I can get so focused into it. The problem is I forget to eat, I forget to poop, I forget to pee, I forget to do everything else, but I will just get hard out into that subject. So yeah, it's never been a hard thing for me to do to focus on my studies. It's a hard thing for me to do to stay in my workflow if someone derails me from that. So if I get distracted, it's a 45-minute kind of kind of pathway of getting back to whatever I was doing before. So that's the biggest thing, is getting derailed from other people.
Do you find, because I often find with the, with my focus is that I can either be, as you say, it's like, I could be up at 4 a.m. I haven't looked away from my laptop for 16 hours and I've gotten tons of stuff done. Or I'll sit in front of the most, using program design as an example, the most basic GBC program, which I've written for 10 years and just feel this inability, like this, a wooden bridge with slats missing. Like you mentioned, like when you get distracted, it's difficult to come back into it. Like, do you have a sort of routine when it comes to your studies that allows you now to stay focused? Is there certain things you do to make sure you eliminate those distractions and can get into that zone?
The biggest thing is stay away from people. so I don't leave my house. I just stay in my area, and Zoe never bothers me when I'm kind of doing that stuff. But yeah, that's the thing. It's very difficult to have strategies like that, because you literally are like, oh, there's a squirrel. Oh, well, I'll just go over here and do this. And then, 2 hours later, you're like, oh shit, I was supposed to finish that. And then it's like, oh, cool, I've got my Rubik's Cube here. I'm going to play with that a little bit. And then it's like 2 hours later, I'm like, oh fuck, I haven't even gotten restarted on what I was supposed to. So a lot of it is just trying to stay organized, which is difficult for someone with ADD. You need lists, and then you lose your lists. So you have like 50 lists, and then you have to try to automate it and make it autonomous by putting it in a computer. And then, there's all kinds of shit that goes wrong. So a lot of it is just building a lot of habits to turn those into rituals. So like when I get up for work, I do the same shit every day. I sit in front of my computer and I bring up chronometer, and I go through all of my clients and I look at what they've averaged out over the last 7, 14, 21, 28 days of food. And I look at how their weights averaged. And then I make notes on who I need to talk to and what I need to say to them. And then I go through my other coaches. So anybody that's kind of a problem client or having problems, I'll go through theirs and see how they're doing. Then I can email my coaches. Second thing I do is go straight into True Coach, and I look at any videos I need to look at and critique their technique. And then I see if there's any messages, and then I'm done. Like I can 3 or 4 hours first thing in the morning, I'm done with all that. And then I can go into, now I can study and research and write and do that type of thing.
Do you feel like having ADHD helps you be a better presenter? Like that little bit of like, because often going into like, we obviously love it, but you got people coming into you're getting overwhelmed, getting with the sort of like the deep material, and often you've been known in the industry for a lot of it being someone that makes all this stuff quite fun, when a lot of educators can be making it very, it's this rep scheme, it's very almost deadpan. Do you feel like that's helped you have like come like out their personality?
Yeah, and it does, because it gives me a position where I can be myself and I can be a maniac. So it's funny because when I stand up and I present, there's some people that think, oh, that's an act. Like he doesn't really act like that. I'm like, no, this is people who know me and talk to me outside of me speaking and lecturing. They go, no, that's how he talks. Like he cusses that much and he says that much inappropriate shit. Like that's him. I don't put on any fronts. But that being said, I do always, when I get up to talk, I want it to be entertainment. I want it to feel like a performance. Like I want you to feel like you come to a show. And I think that's what's missing from a lot of guys. They just don't, they've got the knowledge, but they don't know how to turn it into something fun, like you would get dressed up to and go have dinner and then hear this person speak. So that if you just come in and hear this sciencey shit and it's super dry, like go to college for that, because that's really easy. Yeah, but if they come into me, I want to make sure that they're getting the most that they can get out of it, which is not just the information on how to apply it, but also having a good fucking time and also being highly offended.
Yeah, I think this, maybe not to the same level, but certainly this was my own experience with training coaches in particular, but even training clients. I feel that the pros and cons of being like this is that I've managed to put my foot in my mouth a lot. I've got myself in a lot of trouble, especially where I used to work, because free speech isn't common. But just like that. But I've also managed to, I've got this thing where people, and I suppose one of you have the same thing, where people end up trusting you because you're willing just to speak your mind and a little bit of verbal diarrhea. When you're having a conversation with someone, they're genuine. And I find there's nothing worse, than having a conversation when you can just see the cogs turning. And I'm just like, I don't want to trust you anymore. Do you feel that's helped sort of because you've built a very, I would say, cult following, although it's getting more mainstream by the day, but a cult following in the industry as being one of the guys to go to. Do you feel like that's helped out a lot?
Let's not use that word cult. Let's leave cult and
I'm using it as a
shit
for a change.
Yeah. Let's just say we've built an interest in what we do. That sounds better, right? I think people appreciate when you're genuine, and people are attracted that other people are genuine and aren't trying to hide things, right? And there's a lot of people in our industry that they're very dogmatic in what they do, very myopic. They're very black and white, do this, not that. But that's not how this stuff works. And there's not enough people that are standing up there that will harness humility and be genuine. So if someone asks me something I don't know, I'll just tell them I don't know. I don't know, but I'll try to find out for you. And if I can't, I'll find who can and I'll send them your way. But there's a lot of guys who they want to be this pseudo expert, and they'll just answer questions by pulling shit out of their ass. And then you hear this and you go, but that's not correct. That's not even close. But they're so convincing in the way they say it that everyone just follows, and then it gets repeated in the industry, and it makes the industry a worse place. I think more people need to just be comfortable saying, look, I don't have all the answers. I don't know. That's outside of my scope of expertise, my scope of knowledge, whatever. But I do know a few guys who might know. Let me ask them, and then let me get back to you.
And I suppose those people are thinking that if they don't know the answer to something, they're not as much of an expert. They don't know the answer. And I think it probably hinders them, because you saying, I don't know, but I will find out, now leads you down to meet someone, improve your network, or someone that could educate you in helping you have that answer. I know part of the reasons why I wanted to do this for so many years is just almost being able to chat to really interesting people that are smarter than me in their field. And it's that often your own arrogance and pride will actually stop you growing, because it's that ability to find people like yourself and all the people I've had on this podcast that have taught me so much through the years. This is not about me. I remember when I had Andrew Coates on, he was saying that talk about storytelling. He was like, if this was a Harry Potter movie, the coach's job is to be Dumbledore, not to be Harry, not to be the star of the show. And I absolutely love that.
Yeah, I like that. That's good, man. I'm gonna have to talk to him about that, because you need to explain that to me more, because that's good. Yeah.
And you talk that was a really interesting conversation, because every story has to, going back to the fiction literature, every story is that sort of same thing. There's a guide, there's your hero, and they all go through a very, very similar path. And it's quite interesting when you draw parallels to this. Again, someone else is well read. This is my wake-up call to start reading more fiction, I think, this episode.
You've heard me say this in program design and foundations and stuff. You have to look at this. If we go back to storytelling, you're hired by the client to help them write a book. Essentially, you're the editor, right? So you're going to lay out the outline of how this needs to go. We need a table of contents. Then we're going to need a chapter 1 that opens and everything. And then we need to go look at the end. So how do you write a proper program? Well, you have to look at the end and work your way back to where you're beginning. So it's a lot like that, but ultimately the client has to actually write the book. They have to actually put the words on the paper, and it's your job to just edit things and correct things, and also to guide them towards that end conclusion.
I think that's a good way of saying it, help them write a book, because I think there's a lot of, going back to dogmatic things, when people look at sort of program design with people, it's almost very much it's do this, and they have this idea in their head of where they want to be, and if the client doesn't necessarily agree to that, I always reference you with it, where people say I want to lose a couple of pounds, and you just throw them in the squat rack and make them get on stage. The years I have in this, the more conversation in terms of my clients becomes so much more important. It's I'm going to let you dictate this story, and I'll just guide you if you need my help.
Yeah. I mean, it's the thing. A client comes to you, and you've heard me say this before. When I first started out, first started out, and a girl walks in. She's like, "Oh, I just want to lose like 5 pounds." And I'm looking at her like, "Okay, 6 months, I'll have you on stage bikini show, and then it's going to be IFBB. We'll do nationals, and we're going to go pro." Like that was going on in my head. And that's not what they were asking me for. They only wanted to legit lose 5 pounds. And that's all that they cared about. And that was back in the day when I'd be like, well, let me explain to you the difference between losing weight and losing fat. And I was just this pompous little shit, like most guys when they first come into the training thing before they have enough experience to understand that you're saying the wrong things and you're focusing on the wrong things, and you and your client aren't matching up with what they're actually asking you to do. And you can only get that with experience. You can't read about that in a book. You can hear someone say it, but ultimately you have to basically go through a dozen clients and be like, okay, why do I keep losing clients? Maybe I'm not listening to them. Maybe I'm telling them too much of where they want to go instead of finding out actually where they want to go. Super common thing for coaches to do. It's a huge mistake as well, but we've all done it. Same with the guys,
Yeah, and I also think as well, like you might find some of these people, not that you would have necessarily gone and wanted the goals you set for them initially, but it was that hardwire approach. But a lot of that they're often guarded by insecurities, not comfortable in the gym, like not sure what they can achieve. And you might find if you like that person who they go to another coach that listens to them, that asks questions, that finds out a little bit more about them, and then just thinks, okay, let's lose that first 5 pounds. They may be 20 pounds down in 6 months. They may be a person who goes, sure, maybe I could do like a stage show. Like I remember when I first started, I was very dogmatic about exercise classes. It's like, what the fuck are you doing going to Zumba? Zumba's a sack of shit. Like, you should be doing hardcore weight training. I'm just like, this guy's like 140 kilos with bad knees. I'm just like, come on, he maybe just wants to dance. Like,
yeah.
I remember doing aqua aerobics. Have you ever done aqua aerobics?
No. Is that where you flipping around on silks and shit?
No, that's aerial yoga. I've not done that. Yeah. But aqua aerobics is when you're in the swimming pool doing something.
Aqua, water. Aqua okay, got it.
Yeah, like that one moment might change my thought about exercise classes in my career. Yeah. Those old dears, they blew me out of the water doing this aerobic stuff. And I was like, I'm not judging any class ever again. Yeah.
Well, look, I mean, my background. Who I've had many mentors, but one of my main mentors, massively anti-aerobic, anti-carb, anti all this stuff, and that shaped me initially until later when I kind of broke out of that and started getting into the textbooks and getting other mentors and figuring out, maybe we need some aerobics, maybe we need to have carbs, maybe we need to have this, maybe we have that, and so I had a similar experience to your aqua aerobic thing. So one of my really good friends teaches body combat, the Les Mills, like they do like the Tai Bo shit, and I was like, I went to see her and we did a charity thing where I trained her for charity and all of her clients got to come and watch and all that. And so I just completely brutalized her. And after it, she goes, well, since I did that with you, come in on Monday and do body combat with me. And I went, nah, man, I'm not going to do body combat. Like, I'm not in that type of shape. Like, I'm super out of shape right now. She goes, no, just come in. And I finally went, all right, fuck it. So if Zoe will do it, I'll do it. So Zoe and I went and did it. And man, I think it was like a 45-minute class. And I'm in the back of the class and I'm doing my punches and my elbows and my knees. I'm super into it, like the first half of it. And I was like, fuck, man, I'm starting to get winded. Shit. And I'm looking around and there are girls who are seriously overweight. I mean, these girls are like 50, 60% body fat. And they're hammering it. They're just, shua, shua, shua. I'm in the back. I'm fucking about to puke. And at the time, I was shredded as. I was almost single-digit body fat, and I thought I was in real good shape. And I'm looking around at all these other girls who don't look like they're in shape, they're in massively good shape. And I was in the back going, fuck, okay, it's 45 minutes. I look at the clock, it's been 15 minutes. I'm like, fuck, I'm never going to make it. And that was one of those things that changed my ideas about that. And I didn't even have solid ideas about no classes at that point, but at that point I went, okay, maybe this is good for my clients if they want to do this type of shit. I'm all for it. as long as we can balance it out with everything else in the program.
Yeah, exactly. It's looking at risk reward, I suppose, for these sort of things, right? Like, if someone's coming into you with 20 years of knee pain and it's a big, Les Mills body burpee class, then maybe there's a different conversation we had than someone who coming into the gym for the first time and like just they don't really like being there, but maybe a bit of Zumba might get them started, and get them going in the right direction.
But on that same token, if you get the super hardcore strength trainers, strength coaches, like I used to be, like non-wavering, black and white, bitch, get your ass in the squat rack type of guy. I mean, some of those guys would go, well, you shouldn't do aerobics or the aerobics classes because it's bad for your knees. You got a bad knee, but they'll put somebody with a fucking hernia, a bum knee, a peg leg, and a fucking scoliosis, and they'll make them squat 300 kilos, and they don't think there's anything wrong with that. So that's what I don't understand. It's like, you don't like that activity because of these things, but you'll let everybody squat, and maybe 15% of your clients do even have the orthopedic profile to even do a deep squat.
Yeah,
so it just blows my mind.
Yeah, it's cherry picking stuff for what suits your narrative rather than what doesn't suit your narrative, right? So what's like, obviously you've mentioned, and we know about the cardio thing and things like this, but what's like, is there any other big sort of like dogmatic sort of like beliefs that you've held in the industry that you've like had massively turned around in the last few years?
Man, a lot, not in the last few years, but probably about 10 years ago, things started to change. And one of them was the low carb versus high carb thing. And, I was massively low carb, not keto, but, modified low carb, that type of thing. Paleo-ish, but not really paleo, because I feel like that's pretty silly. I'm not dressing up like a caveman and getting my spear and running into the grocery store, like crawling through the floor at Tesco's, coming up to the fucking beef section and spearing some fucking beef, and then making a fire in the middle of the grocery store, right? But the type of thing, right? Meat veg. I was big into that, and I still am for me. But then I got to where I'm like, okay, I need to be giving people what's good for them. And so for some people that might be high carb, low fat. Some people that may be high fat, low carb. So I had to change the way I looked at diet because I was so far into that one section of it. And I realized that this stuff has to be basically prescribed, for lack of a better word, for the specific individual, for their personal chemistry, but also what they can actually accomplish, what they can actually be compliant on. So that nutrition was a big one for me. Yeah, 100%. But I still eat very high protein, low to moderate carb, and low to moderate fat. And I feel that's the best for me, but that's not for everybody. But I do find that works really well for a lot of people. But I got people who eat 70% carbs, like 20% protein, 10% fat, and they just kill it,
Apologies for the child dying in the background there for during the end of that last question. Don't know what's happened out there. Probably was realizing that she could actually eat carbs for the first time in her 9 years.
Probably.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, I think that's an interesting one with nutrition. Obviously, like we all know how well studied you are, and like how you're learning more and more about what's optimal in terms of dieting for the individual and how to change certain things. Do you feel that your approach to nutrition has become more flexible or less flexible as you started to learn more about what you're doing?
I feel like it's gotten more flexible as far as looking at a broad range of diets. It has gotten a bit less flexible with what I want my clients to do, at least initially, because after training as many people as I have, especially with nutritional coaching, there's a lot of times where people just don't need a flexible fucking approach. Most people, if you give them a flexible approach, they'll be too flexible. So I personally would rather give them a semi-rigid, semi-static template, at least in the first few weeks. I prefer them to weigh and measure and track, just to give them an idea of how many calories are actually in food, because they have no idea. The general population have such low nutritional literacy that they go, I don't want to track. And this is even coaches too. We get all the coaches that track it. And we had a coach the other day who ate Pizza Hut pizza, and he goes, there's no way that there's that many calories in that. There's no way. There's no way there's that much fat and carbs. Like, dude, it's a fucking Pizza Hut pizza. It's like a deep dish Pizza Hut pizza. Yes, there's like 4,000 fucking calories in that. How are you a coach and you don't know that? Like, I don't understand this, but they never know until they actually track things. So we get people to track and they're like, oh, I do it really good Monday through Friday. And then there's their booze on the weekend. Holy shit, 4,000 calories of booze. You're like, yeah. So the Reader's Digest version, it's become flexibly inflexible. So the way I look at it is I look at it from an area of those 4 levels of competence, right? So I've got subconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, conscious competence, and then subconscious competence. And I look at it as this is going to sound horrible to anybody listening. If one of my clients is listening to this, I apologize. It's like training a dog. When you get a puppy, you give it a real fucking short leash and you got a prong collar on. And anytime it gets out of the way, you go, pow, and you just fucking snap that prong collar and it gets the puppy back in line. So in the early stages, you kind of have to be like that with your clients because they just don't know any better. And then when they move to the next level, now you can take the prong collar off, but you still got a pretty short leash. And now you could just kind of tug them and guide them. And then they get to the next level and you give them a little bit more leash, and then eventually you can take the leash off. But you have to train clients the same way you would train a puppy like that, is that, they will be the worst. What's the thing? They'll be their own worst enemies because they just don't have enough information or knowledge to make the right decisions. And that's our job, to teach them how to do that and create structure.
There's so many things I like in what you just said. That I am so glad you talked about the structure things for meal plans. Because I suppose talk about the coaches not tracking. It's probably more in denial. I always, when I look at tracking, look at food diaries now, I go, right, is there something I'm aware whenever I start dieting and start tracking stuff of my habits and the things I want to do, whether I do it or not. Because if I do it, I know my clients will do it. So like a couple of things I would use. Like I used to have these last like these Dairy blue cheese triangles, like 20 calories a pop, and it was just like a couple of them would just get me through a meal. And I wouldn't track it; it's 40 calories.
Yeah.
But it's what a client would do with a cookie. Oh, it's only small.
Yeah.
And it's 200, 300 calories 4, 5, 6, 7 times a week. Or I remember going to a restaurant once and really wanting the spare ribs. And it's my mini diets that always show me these things. My proper diets are like tunnel vision, I'm in. But if it's like mini diet where I've got no goal for it doesn't really matter. This is where I was like, I looked through my fitness pal, like scrolling up, like which spare ribs is the best. I will take an hour if needed. It's not the 4,000 calorie, but it's definitely that 400 calorie portion. Like no fucking way that is the case. Yeah. And that's when I started to notice more things in my clients' food diets. Like a couple of things I remember was 13 and a half cashew nuts. Like who breaks cashew nuts? Yeah. Like they're either overly precise or they've just gone, that's about right.
Or they were like, yeah, one of them was a bit smaller than the others. So we just said 0.6, 0.7, I don't know.
1 ounces of steak.
What's that?
1 ounces of steak. Who the fuck eats a 1 ounce steak?
I don't understand too, like living overseas now, like I don't understand why people don't use the fucking metric system. It drives me insane. When I go, okay, so if you're using MyFitnessPal, I use Chronometer. When I go into Chronometer and I see one of our clients has put pounds in for their weight, I immediately text them and I go, nah, put your scale on kilograms, get with the rest of the fucking planet. Stop using that. Here's the way I think of it too, especially it's the Americans, right? It's either Americans or sometimes the people in UK. And you never know with the UK what you're going to get. You could get pounds, you get kilograms, you could get fucking stone. You could get some other fucking medieval way of fucking counting somebody's weight or height, like hands and shit. And I used to get so mad because I had Brits.
Sorry to cut you off. I've just got this image of Holy Grail. I'm just seeing an old way of saying how it's a duck.
Yeah. I get guys from England and they'd send me this fucking today I weighed 10 stone and I'm like, fuck, now I gotta fucking convert to a stone is 14 and then divide by 2.2 for kilograms. And I'm like, can you just fucking put that in as kilograms, please? But one thing I like to do with the Americans, I make them, especially the women, flip their scale to kilograms, because then when they gain weight, it's not so scary, because if you gain 1 pound, they lose their fucking minds. But if they gain 400 grams, they're like, oh, that's grams, that's nothing. And I'm like, that's a fucking pound. 454 is a pound, but they don't know that. So it tricks them. So you get away with that for a while, and then they start getting smart and they go, oh, hold on a minute. I've been gaining 454 grams a week. That's a pound. And I'm like, yeah, and you haven't freaked out and you look great. Fuck it. But
that's not a bad
yeah,
idea.
so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like the meal plan thing is interesting as well, because it's almost become my catchphrase in the last year, because it's almost been trendy for coaches to go, meal plans don't teach you anything. I'm like, what are you on? Like, meal plans teach you structure. It'll teach you like food prep. It'll teach you habitual habits. It'll teach you so much based off this and how a diet should actually look like when it's not Big Macs.
Yeah. And
like, it's mad that people think they go, the dog collar is a great analogy. I've always thought it's like learning a language. It's like, if the meal plan is like Luke, you saying, I want to learn Spanish, and I go, here's a Rosetta Stone tape. The macros approach to go, just go to Spain, but I don't need to learn any words first. No, you'll pick it up, speak to Spanish people, and just hope it makes up. It never does.
Yeah, I mean, look, when you learn a language, it's like you learn all the conjugations and all that stuff. And that is, they give you the conjugations. So you got to write down your present, past, future, all that stuff. And that's how you learn it. The way I see it is, I don't like giving people static meal plans, but I like working with my clients to create their own meal plan. So what I typically will do is I'll write their macros and I'll write their calories, and then I'll go in the chronometer and I'll separate that out into, say, 4 or 5 sections for meals. And I go, okay, I want you to have around 500, 600 calories per meal. That's how much protein, carb, and fat. Now let's work on what proteins you'll eat every day and not get that bored. And if you do get bored, we can make an exchange list. But I make my clients write their own diet, but I'm there helping them do it. So I'm like, okay, let's put in some starch. You could have some starch, you could have fruit. Okay, so that could be rice, potato, sweet potato, whatever, or you could have grapes or bananas or whatever you want. And they're like, oh, I think I want some potato. Cool, put that in there. And then they're like, holy shit, that's a lot of carbs. I'm like, that's okay. We'll just use charisma potatoes, which are 25% less carbs. Now you have more carbs or more volume. They're like, oh, that's cool. So we do it as an educational thing, and they create their own meal plan. And what I find is they eat that pretty consistently for 3, 4, 5 weeks. They start getting bored, but then they say, holy shit, I've lost 5 kilos in the last 5 weeks. I'm like, yeah, look at that. That's what happens when we follow a static plan that doesn't have any deviations. We've got accuracy, we've got precision, and the weight goes. The most successful clients that I see are the people who do that, who have structure and eat the same shit every day. And they might pop, a little of this, a little of that out, but it's pretty much the same stuff every day. And I'm telling you, we see most of them 1 kilo a week of weight loss significantly and consistently over time.
Yeah, I agree with that from the people I've seen. It just eliminates margin for error, because regardless even if there's tracking error within it, if it's static, at least like they're eating this. If you think it's 1800 and it's actually 2000, it's still consistently a 2000, right? And often I find that the people that want decadence, I always panic a little bit when I get a client asking me for recipes, and it's not because I'm against recipes. Like, and it's 2 reasons. 1, you don't want my recipes; they're boring as fuck. And 2, like when you're looking at often I find if someone's like resourceful and has this sort of detective mindset, they'll go and find the recipes themselves and go, hey, do these work on my meal plan? I go, cool, here's a few more. But it's more this, I want everything to taste like Gordon Ramsay prepared it for me, especially on a Wednesday between meetings. And it's like, not every meal needs to be a la carte.
It's like that's why you look like you do right now, because you've been eating Gordon Ramsay shit all the time, and you don't want to look like Gordon Ramsay shit anymore. So let's get lean first, and then you go back to eating Gordon Ramsay shit every once in a while, not every meal. The thing is, this is what kills me, is people don't know how to cook. if people knew how to cook, like I love my meals and I eat the same shit every day. I wake up and I have 4 eggs almost every morning with a little bit of paprika, smoked paprika, and a little bit of Malden sea salt. Like that's the best fucking salt ever, the Malden fucking crystal flakes. A little bit of cracked pepper. I have that and a cappuccino. Done. Lunch, I almost always have chicken thigh. I might have like 250, 300 grams of chicken thigh. And I take it. I can make it taste any way I want to. I can do lemon pepper. I can do, buttered garlic. I can do hot and spicy. I just use a different blend, a different rub every day. And that's easy. And then I might throw in a salad, chunky salad or something with some cucumber and tomato and red onion, and I'm done. If I need starch, I can add a little bit of rice to that. It's super easy. But people want to make these goddamn fucking Food Networks 4-hour fucking meals where they're putting in, fucking truffle butter shit that was blessed by a shaman or some bullshit. They just use the fucking salt and the butter. Like, just stop eating so much hyper palatable shit, and you won't be begging for hyper palatable shit all the time. Our job is really hard.
I don't like. I see people like that, and often they don't get it. Like you're a lawyer that works 400 hours a week, or you're an investment banker that is up to him or cracking deals. How do you have the time for this food prep that you can't cook, and now you're 8 hours of cooking a day? Like what?
Yeah. No, man, you need good, man. I can cook those eggs I told you. The easiest way for me to cook eggs, I just take butter and I just go over the pan before it's hot. I turn it on. I crack 4 eggs in it. I put a fucking glass top on it and I cook it real low. I go and take a shit. I go brush my teeth or do whatever I'm gonna do. I go fucking pick up the dog shit in the backyard, whatever I'm gonna do that morning. I go by, check on it. Not still going. I can go out and do everything I want while that's being cooked because it's cooking so slow. And then I'm almost assured it's never going to burn. Because I hate burnt eggs. I cannot stand the bottom of them being any types of burn. And I need the yolks to be runny. So if you bake it like that, you basically steam the eggs. It's almost foolproof unless you're a moron, and the eggs come out perfect every time. The lunch I do, I've got an air fryer. Air fryer will cook perfect chicken thighs in 16 minutes. And all you have to do is put them in there, turn it on, flip it over when it's halfway through. That's it. So like people need to understand you don't need to fucking go to cooking school, culinary school to figure out how to do this. Even my dinner, I always have steak, I have a salad with some feta cheese, and then I might have some rice or I might have a chocolate bar, and that's it, which is what I had tonight. I've wanted an air fryer for a long time. Like no one here cooks in Hong Kong. Like when we had the COVID cases hit like 180, which is the most we've ever had. For one day, Carrie Lam closed the all like the restaurants like completely. We had them closed for dinners for a while, but lunchtimes. And like because no one cooks, there was just tons of people on the street just eating takeout food. Like it was worse. Like it's the people like we don't have crazy. We don't have an oven. Most flats don't have an oven. It's the difficult thing here. It's like I've learned how to be resourceful more here than ever because no one cooks and no one like steps have to be purposeful here. Like I remember I was outside this place called Landmark and there's this big like queue for taxis and the taxis all come in and the people will get in a taxi or drive off and instead of walking down to the second taxi, everyone waits for the taxi to arrive at their feet to walk in. How weird.
Yeah, and this is when you say to someone, could you do 10,000 steps a day or could you just do whatever, a bit of cardio in the week? And they're like, that's like 12 hours of walking. Like, no, it's not. You have no concept of how long it takes to do an activity. But moving sort of like into some of the training stuff, and we spoke about jumping on this and talking a little bit about, you've been known for the least most stuff and improving someone for the stress and mental states with regards to training and a lot of fat loss stuff with that. But for people that might not know, if they're not in the program design course and on the back end and see all the good stuff you've done, some of the most impressive results you've come out at the moment is improving people's mobility, resting posture, getting people out of pain, and before us we go into some of the specifics with that, like for people, I always say that someone was telling me this yesterday. When you get to around about your early 30s, there's a point where, just bodybuilding becomes sort of like you start going into other realms. Like people start becoming osteos, or they start doing BJJ, and they always have an injury story or two that's sent them down this path. Like, what is it for you that got you more into looking at like movement? Because you were always known as a nutrition guy. Like, how have you become like there? How's your journey to learning this?
It's funny. It's funny that I became the nutrition guy because people don't realize I was a national level competitive powerlifter. I competed in strongman. I competed in bodybuilding and men's bikini, men's physique. Like I've done a lot. I've competed in martial arts stuff. Like I've done all of this high performance sports stuff, and everyone always comes to me to make them lose weight. It's like, fuck, man, I could make you an absolute fucking weapon. But it's been in the last couple of years, we've actually got people coming in. It's like, I want to be a fucking assassin. Cool. I got you, bro. Like we've got so much other things, right? But with the movement and mobility stuff, it kind of came along when I left Polican Group. And I was like, man, we're teaching all these people how to train professional athletes, and none of them are training professional athletes. And there's a really hardcore emphasis on maximal strength. And I'm like, man, that's just like maximal strength is important, but it's important as a foundation for other quality. What am I looking for? The development of other sports qualities like speed and power and change of direction and agility and things like that. And I went, man, I'm seeing a lot of the people that I'm dealing with have really horrible movement issues. Like they can't. I'm done level 1 and level 2 animal flow. I try to teach a client how to do an animal flow position. They can't even get set up for it. Man, this is really fucking bad. Like squatting, deadlifting, benching, all that stuff's cool, but fuck, man, someone can't even get on and off the ground without having like 800 different points of contact trying to get up. There's something wrong with that. Like we need to start thinking about where we need to put what we need to put first, the horse or the cart. And I just got to the point where I realized strength is cool, but mobility and flexibility and the ability to control yourself in positions is probably the most important thing you can do from a locomotion standpoint. And because strength is stupidly easy. It's stupidly easy to get real fucking strong. When I was a kid and I started training when I was like 8 years old. That was back in 1986. That's when I started like actually lifting and like lifting hard out for Texas football. And it was super easy. Bench, squat, deadlift, go home, eat a lot, come back, add more weight to the bar, bench, squat, deadlift. Like getting really fucking strong is not rocket science, but getting really strong without creating a lot of fucked up shit in your body, that's the true art of how do I get real fucking strong, but not create an impingement in my shoulder, FAI in my hip, lower back compression and pain. And I think we've lost sight of that because a lot of these people who should be talking and exchanging information on methods, they should be agreeing with each other that everyone's right in certain situations and everybody's wrong in certain situations. They've all decided, no, we're just going to tell each other to fuck off and go our separate ways. So you got this side, all these powerlifters going, nah, just use less weight and squat with less weight. Find the weight you can squat at that you don't have any pain. Just keep squatting. I'm like, cool. Then you got these guys do all these sissy ass fucking rehab exercises, do a bunch of fucking open cans and fucking clam shells and just do that shit for fucking 4 years and never feel better. Like somewhere between both of those sides is the truth. So that's where I kind of headed off about 6 years ago. I went on this journey to find out what's the truth between both of these sides.
Yeah, I had this when I was speaking to Tom Hibbert recently, this thing about like warm-ups. Like people end up getting into these 40-minute warm-ups and hardly ever any time for their training. And it's you never ever get any better. They never get any closer to it. Do you feel like when it comes to you obviously going into the strength stuff, it's a lot of the guys were tight, were having a lot of pain. Do you feel like, what do you feel like causes or gets people into these sort of like bad starting positions? Do you feel it's just ego putting too much weight in the bar and just overloading themselves for years, or is there more to it in terms of what you see?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we can think of it as, the law of repetition of efforts. The law of repetition of efforts can build a skill in a positive direction or can build a skill in a negative direction. So I think part of it is a lot of it's ego lifting. A lot of it is maxing out all the time on the same shit. And just every time you do that, you shift a little bit further and further outside of your acceptable technique. And then you ingrain that motor pattern. And then that affects other things. And then the next thing you do, you wake up and you got chronic pain. And that's now how you squat, because you can't deviate from that. A lot of it is just improper, not paying attention to muscular chains and how they affect each other. A lot of it is poor program design, where it's just the emphasis is too much on this one thing or this couple of things, and not looking at a global, I hate the word holistic, but it makes sense here, like a holistic global kind of thing of how these chains work together. A lot of it is, not taking care of your conditioning and your blood pressure, not taking care of your sympathetic nervous system, not taking care of your electrolyte balance as far as like sodium, potassium, not taking care of resting heart rate and sleep, inflammation. There's a lot of things here that can contribute to this. And all of these things could be a big contribution, or they could be a really small contribution. But, what I reckon for most people is that your ability to move is going to be dependent on where your joints can go. And if you've done things and pulled a bone outside of its normal position, you've reduced its capacity to move into certain ranges of motion. So then the body responds by limiting those ranges of motion and causing pain. And then that affects other areas. So for instance, when I was growing up in Texas, it was really common, like it is in most countries, that Monday, Wednesday, and Friday were international bench press days. So everybody's bench and biceps. So if you look at the shoulder, if I'm benching, that's inherently going to pull the humerus forward. And if I'm doing a lot of biceps, that's going to shorten all this and it's going to pull it forward. So lo and behold, you go in after somebody's been doing this for 5 years and they look like a fucking watermelon farmer. So they look like they're just walking around with these 2 watermelons, right? And then they go, I can't bench anymore because it just destroys my shoulder. And by the way, I get this weird fucking hip pain and it's affecting my lower back. You're like, interesting. It's like, yeah, my foot hurts too. It's like, okay, now it's a chicken or egg thing. It's probably related to something they did here that then worked its way down. But the body's always going to move away from pain. And the absence of pain does not mean the absence of dysfunction. You could be moving away from pain that you're not cognizant, you don't have cognitive awareness of, because the brain hasn't told you there's an issue because it's working around it. So you're looking at, I might be moving away from pain. I might be moving away from instability and chasing stability. I might be moving towards a position where I'm trying to find more space to move a bone. So there's a lot of different things that can contribute to that.
When you're looking at obviously pain, obviously we have to look at pain in terms of, if someone comes in pain, if you can get someone out of pain, I think you'll get a buy-in that you'll never get from anything, including getting them a 6-pack and getting the best shape of their life. And but when you're looking at pain, and certainly looking at pain science, it's very complex. Like a lot of it, like what's painful to you might not feel painful to me, or vice versa.
Yeah.
It's very subjective. Do you use pain other than just like making the client happy and buying into the services? How much do you use pain as part of your decision-making process, or is it something that's sort of there, but I look at other stuff? Like, how do you start to look at what's going on here?
Well, yeah, I mean, if they say they're in pain, it's like, okay, have you actually seen like physio, or have you seen an osteo or something like that? What did they say? Okay. And then I might give them a proper assessment. And now I've got to determine where that's coming from. So what is the higher order thing that's now trickled down to causing this issue? What needs to be rectified to move them away from that pain state? But then you also have to look at it as far as like, there's other things this client has come to me for. So that might be losing weight, that might be putting on muscle. I also have to keep that in mind. Like, cool, I'm going to make you not have pain if you do what I tell you to do, but I have to integrate all of that in with a comprehensive program that's also going to get them really fucking jacked and shredded, because that's what they're actually coming to me for. So yeah, so I look at, where do you feel pain? Let's figure out what's causing it. So we're going to try to find out, like, if this is moved in this direction, what muscles could be contributing to that? How's the nervous system playing? What are you guarding? What's causing apprehension? Now we got to work up that chain. So let's say it's something in the ankle. We got to look at the hip. I'm looking at the hip. I got to look at the low back. I look at that. I got to look at rotation in the upper body. There's a lot of stuff I have to look at when we're coming back from that. And then finding big exercise that fix a lot of shit and not wasting time on a lot of little dinky ass rehab, traditional rehab or contemporary rehab stuff. So I'm looking at it as far as we got to get moving. So we need to look at what big movements. 80% of it needs to be big movements, and 15 or 20% might be little sissy ass open can clamshell shit bullshit stuff.
Yeah, I mean, so when it comes to like what we're looking at, like what's actually possible, and I've deliberately thrown this question in there because I know on the forums you mentioned that this annoys you, so this hopefully will give good content. But when you look, so when we're looking at movement capabilities now, we tend to have two camps. You mentioned the two camps earlier on, but we've got the obviously the pure strength guys who say it's do less weight or just sort of power through, and everyone should have got a squat, bench, deadlift. And then on the other side, you've got the mechanics guys who I don't want to call out, because mechanics is great and physics is irrefutable, but obviously with any trend, there's a lot of people that don't apply it particularly well, that talk a lot about moving around dysfunction because you haven't got an x-ray, you can't see what the actual posture is, you can't see bone spurs. Like, what is your stance on that view, and what do you feel is actually possible? What do you feel can be changed?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I might not be able to look at somebody's body, but we have pretty recognized degrees of range, passive and active in certain body parts. We can also do we can do tolerance tests to see if they feel pain when we do certain things. We've got manual muscle testing, which I still do manual muscle testing, mainly to see if one side versus the other is at a deficiency. But I use an electronic device that actually tells me how many kilograms of force they're pushing with. So I've now gotten past that point of, well, that feels stronger than that one. Now I can actually quantify it with this device. So that's changed a lot of things with me too. It's also changed a lot of things that I was thinking about with, people saying, well, shoulder position doesn't matter if there's no pain, blah, 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 blah. And I said, okay, cool. So I took myself and two other people, and I used this muscle testing device, which can it's basically electronic dynamometer. And I said, okay, let's take a grip and let's just put the arm in neutral position and squeeze and see how many kilograms of force. Cool. Now let's protract the shoulder, internally rotate, and do it again. My grip was like 83 or 85 kilograms. And when I protracted, internally rotated, and tried to do it again, it dropped by about 30 or 40 kilograms of force. Yeah. So think about how that's going to affect everything, because those nerves are traveling from the neck into the hand. So if that position is affecting the hand, it's also going to affect afferent signal back to the brain. So possibly being in a position of protraction and internal rotation, can that affect your lifting? Is that going to fuck up your bench, your overhead stuff? Well, if it's cutting down that feedback back and forth, probably. So what else did we do? There's one other big one I did. I did one where I did grip here, and then I did grip in a slightly flexed position and grip in an extended position. And if I went from here, 80. If I went from here, it dropped down to about 50. If I went down to here, it dropped down to around 23. So if you think about it, guys who are benching that are allowing their wrist to extend, they're possibly fucking up that feedback from the neurons in the hand to the brain, giving it that proprioceptive signal. And also, when do people do this? When they're doing dumbbell or biceps curls, or when they're doing curls and they're looking down at their arms. That's a big one Charles used to talk about, is don't move, look straight ahead. Don't look down, because you're going to actually make yourself weaker. When you test it, it shows that you actually make yourself weaker doing that.
And how many people, when deadlifting, look up themselves in the mirror when they're learning to deadlift?
Yeah, and you know what?
And that changes lumbar position as well. You're even not including this stuff with the nervous system.
I mean, the big thing with that is just there's not a lot of space in the back of your C-spine. So when you go like this and you have a massive weight, you're just ramming those facets together. So Allie Gilbert, now Weingroff, her husband, Charlie Weingroff, who's one of the top doctors of physical therapy in the United States, is a fantastic video on this that shows, I think it's looking at a scan of someone who's lifting, and they have a nice neutral head position, they're tucked and slid back, and it shows what happens when they go into lordosis and extension, and it just ramming the back of their vertebra together. And he's got, I'll send it to you. It's fucking funny as shit. The way he does the commentary on it is just fucking gold.
That's really interesting, and it's interesting personal to me as well, because I think a lot of like I've got a bit of forehead posture, and I feel like that gives me a lot of issues. And like, so I've done looked at this kind of thing a lot, and I for ages I've spoken to you about this on consults of like having this sort of like mid-thoracic spine pain underneath my shoulder blade, and like for a while I was like I couldn't place what was going on with this. I tried sorting out a lot of stuff with the hip, and then that got better, and it didn't go away. And I was like, what's going on? And as I started in the last few months, as my training's picked up again and gone a lot better, that I'm starting to realize there's a definite correlation between my head position. And I start to feel now it's much more precise of what causes the pain. Whereas before it was like random. Whereas now I'm like, if I do this and go into a neutral spine position, I just feel that pain go right down the middle of my spine. And I think like that has a lot to do with it. And like something I've looked at a little bit, I want good to get your advice on it now you brought it up. Like, have you noticed when you're looking at neck position and forward head postures and things like this, having a big effect on something like HRV for that exact reason of the nervous system coming like through here and into that position?
I don't know, because I haven't measured it. But I mean, anytime you're deviated, if you look at all these people who say there's not a perfect posture, cool. I get that there's not a perfect posture. Like, we're not all Vitruvian Man, but there are acceptable and unacceptable deviations from what would be considered perfect posture. So it's like saying there's no good foods and bad foods. Of course, there fucking is good food and bad food. Are you fucking kidding me? Like, you telling me a fucking Twinkie is good compared to a fucking chicken, rice, and broccoli? Of course, that's fucking silly. There's not good and bad posture. Of course there is. You look at somebody who looks like goddamn Quasimodo and you say that their posture is, that's just not, it's not bad. It's just not as good as yours. It's like, no, it's fucking horrendous, and they're going to be in pain, and they're going to be 40 years old. How are they going to feel when they're fucking 65? So I would imagine, if you have massive deviations like this, there's going to be a pain response. It's just not to the point where your brain feels that it needs to bother you about it, right? So mechanoreceptors, they're like, okay, we got an issue here. Maybe there's no space, or maybe they're pressing on something. So let's say that every time you lift this up, it's smacking into the supraspinatus. And now the supraspinatus tendon is starting to thicken up, and you're losing subacromial space. And the mechanoreceptors are going to go, hey, there's a problem. They're talking to the brain, and the brain's like, yeah, we don't need to let Luke know about this just yet. So what I want you to do is I want you to tighten this here. I want you to tighten this here, and then lengthen these two guys. And then this will move forward. We can play with that for a while. But your body does this over and over until one day the brain goes, oh, fuck, we have nowhere else to go. Let Luke know there's a problem. So then you wake up one day and you go, what the fuck is that? That wasn't there yesterday. Oh, fuck. And then you can't do anything. And a lot of people, I would say most people I see, are moving towards that. And that can be easily rectified if we just take care of it. Like, if you're not in pain, that doesn't mean you're not heading that way. You want to take a prophylactic response, because it's much easier to do it preventively than it is to do retroactively.
Yeah, I totally agree. And looking at my experiences and my upper back pain and issues that I've had, a lot of that was like, when I first started training, it was like, and I'm not bashing the guy, but it was like old school bodybuilder workouts. What's the fun of men's health? I used to do a Jamie Alderson workout, which started with 100 leg extensions and as few sets as possible into 4 sets of 20 back squats. Not a hamstring, not a glute exercise in sight. So my pelvis came in a really bad position this often, and as we know, work up into the thoracic spine, and now almost like I'm ticking off one problem, find another problem that comes, and I'm just working my way through the chain. And in that exactly same sense, it's like, I remember speaking to Nick Daniel good buddy of both of ours. And he was like, "Do you get back pain?" I'm like, "No." He's like, "Surprising." And he just walked off.
Yeah.
It's weird to finish a sentence that quickly. But
That is an understatement.
Oh, he's not as bad as he used to be in his mellow years, anyway. But like, and then you just take up the chin, and then eventually getting to late 20s, early 30s, I'm like, oh, this is starting to hurt, and all my back pain starting.
Yeah.
And you get this with clients where it's like they'll go, yeah, like, I blew my lower back out. Well, what happened? I picked up a newspaper. I mean, that must have been a heavy fucking newspaper. It's 5, 10, 15 years of this sort of stuff that causes those issues, right?
Yeah. What you're looking at is you're starting to lose space, and then you nick a nerve. You just pop a nerve. It just it's the slightest little chink, and your nerve goes, "Fuck you! I'm just gonna seize up." And then your client's like, "Oh, fuck!" And they can't turn, they can't do anything, and then it stops spasming, and they're like, "Okay, cool, I'm good." And then they go do something else, and then all of a sudden it's like, "Fuck you, and like, and there's spaz, and then it goes down. So there's so many people that are on the verge of that. I never had back pain until I had fucking horrendous, like fucking horrible nuclear Holocaust back pain, and it's I'm not gonna say it came out of nowhere. I was avoiding some niggles, but they weren't such a pain in the ass that it was inhibiting me from doing things until I came down on my foot wrong. And then boom, I couldn't fucking walk. I couldn't crawl. I couldn't turn in bed. I had to piss in a cup and pour it in a bucket. Like, there's so many people that are that close to one wrong move. This stuff can be easily avoided if we stop fucking ignoring it and just say, well, you can squat the pain away. No, you can't. Squat lighter. No, fix the fucking problem.
Yeah, don't put a plaster on it, right?
Yeah.
So before we go into sort of like some of the strategies we can potentially use to start getting people away from the danger zone that we're talking about. Obviously, you mentioned, like, we both spoke about yourself ignoring some niggles that weren't really affecting you. Me ignoring clear issues with my posture because I wasn't experiencing any pain. Often when you see people speak about this, whether it's the mechanics guys or it's yourself, it all comes from this. They did stuff like, can't supinate, but I'm going to do straight bar bicep curls anyway because Arnie did them, and then their elbows are jacked up. Like, how do you get people like committed to improving, for use of a better term, their structural balance? When like it's not causing me any issues now, why should I bother doing it? I'd rather do this. Like, how do you get people to value it as important?
Well, the first thing is I don't give them a fucking choice. You want to work with me? You're fucked up. Here you go. I'm gonna show you proof of concept. Go into a split squat. Awesome. That looked like fucking garbage. I can give them indicator lifts. I can show them, and they go, okay, that's how it's supposed to look. Then they try to do it, and they're like, yeah, it didn't look like the way you did it. And I'm like, that's right. So we're gonna work on fucking achieving those things. And I look at it as almost like leveling up in a video game. I'm a big World of Warcraft fan. I've been playing it since it started. And, you start off as like a little fucking gnome, little fucking gnome running around, gnome mage or warlock, and you can't do shit. Like, you got a fucking stick, and like everything kills you. And so, the whole goal is to do these quests and repeat things until you go to the next step, which is the next level where you throw fireballs or whatever the fuck you're doing, right? So for me, they don't get a fucking choice. You're paying me for my expertise. I'm telling you you're fucked up. I'm going to fix your fucked upness, right? At least I'm going to tell you how to fix it, and you're going to fix it yourself. And then we're going to move to level 2 mage and level 3 mage. And then when you move up those levels, I'll give you different exercises, but you're not getting bigger, crazier exercises until you can hit the basics and hit the fundamental shit. Another thing I do is I take pictures of them. I'll take pictures and I'll draw plumb lines. I'll draw angles and show them like pelvic tilt. I'll show them a plumb line of where their ear, shoulder, middle of trochanter, knee, and ankle should be. I'll show them from the front and back how deviated they are from where they should be. And realistically, the proof's in the pudding. They're going to see that and go, cool, the line is here, and my head is here. There's obviously something fucked up I need to fix. Or they'll look at from the side and like the line will be here and their head will be over here. And they'll look like, I'll tell them, I'm like, you look like you got the Michael Jackson lean. Like your fucking feet are back here and you're fucking leaned way over here. Like we got to fix that, because the further you lean out, the more you have to rotate the hips and extend the lower back. And then all you're doing is creating a lot of compression and shear that's eventually going to give you debilitating lower back pain. If we can get your hips to rotate back and get your spine to move back into alignment, that's going to take a lot of that pain away, and that's going to fix everything from the hips all the way up, and most of the time all the way down.
So when you're actually looking at this, unless someone comes to you with actual pain, you have to get mega specific. Do you sort of look at sort of like, use of a better term, almost hiding some of this? You mentioned the 80% here earlier on, like almost hiding some of this pre-habby sort of work in exercises, like positioning them in certain exercises to elicit that, whilst also improving the other goals you mentioned, whether that's improving getting jacked arms, getting jacked shoulders? Or do you tend to be like, I want something that really targeted in lower traps or something like that? I'm using that.
Well,
it's easy, right?
Did you ever do PICP?
Not directly. I've done like I
Not directly,
versions of it, like Andre Benoit's equivalent.
Yeah, and where you used to work, I mean, they basically run that model, right? So if you think about it, most people who are listening to this that went through any type of Poliquin training or were used to work, they're already kind of doing that anyways, right? So if you think about it, if I do A1, A2, B1, B2, and let's say that's incline press, and then maybe a lean away pull down, and maybe that's flat press with a seated cable row. So there's your 80%, and you might have a C1, C2. Your 20% might be external rotation and lower trap raise. Right? So a lot of people are already doing this, but the way I look at it, a lot of people are doing exercises that aren't as effective as they should be because their client isn't in a good position to make those exercises work. So I was actually thinking about this today, because I'm going to do a video of how I teach people how to understand internal external rotation. So when you get a client who's doing internal external rotation, a lot of times they don't have the range, so they'll go like this, and they'll throw the shoulder and they'll throw it back. Okay, when I say internal external rotation, I just want the humerus to move. If your shoulder has to move, you don't own that range. Something we got to fix. But and the same thing with the hips. You got to be able to teach what is actual internal external rotation. But if they are in a protracted position and they try to internally externally rotate, you can't be in a protracted position and externally rotate. You can't get there. It's not going to happen. You can't be in a protracted position and do upward rotation, shoulder flexion. So if you have somebody who's got massive protraction, internal rotation, and you're giving them external rotation and lower trap raise, what the fuck are they supposed to do with that? Their shoulder's not in a position where they can actually do it. So then you tell them that they need to do this. Shove that fucking shoulder back, shove that scapula back, and then do your fucking, that would make a really good GIF.
Yeah.
GIF, or whatever they call it. But like, you see it all the time. People are doing their single arm lower trap, and they're like, like, what the fuck are you doing? That should be there naturally. If you can't set that there naturally and just lift your arm, what the fuck are you doing? It's like getting on a row and doing this.
Yeah.
Like doing that. Like you do that when you start, but you should have that figured out later.
You see it all the time with coaches, right? Where I cannot stand when I watch someone coach a pull down and they're literally just like forcing their shoulder blades down. It's like, teach a client how to do that, like rather than just like literally like pulling them into position, like holding their trap. Like you're now just touching the things you don't want to work to try and force them in the position where you want to, rather than going, like, what is actually supposed to happen here? Let them build an awareness.
Well, I'll tell you, I'll be devil's advocate on this. Like, where the fuck did you go?
No,
so I'm gonna be devil's advocate. I feel like there is a time and place for that, but those trainers have no idea about that time or place. So I feel like sometimes when you have a really imbalanced body, you have to have a really imbalanced training program. So like, I'll tell you, like Amanda that you see me post about on the forum, where she was a massive guy, like that's the Quasimodo look. Like you couldn't get more excessive kyphosis, forward head posture, forward shoulder position, protracted scapula. You couldn't get worse than her. We might do something where we actually do over accentuate T-spine extension, overdo shoulder extension and depression, and then just work the humerus through that position while holding all of that nice symmetric position. Same thing with a pull down. We may actually overextend, over depress, over retract, and just do this without moving anything else. But I'm using that for a very, very specific reason. It's realistically only applicable to someone with her condition. But like you said, a lot of these coaches make all of their clients train like that, whether they know why they're doing that or not. And it's not good, because that's not how the shoulders are supposed to work.
I suppose it's also balancing it out in terms of like, in good program design is balancing out these things. Like if you're putting someone in a certain position with something else, balancing something else out to allow it to move. Like for case in point, a lot of things at the moment is should the scapula be locked, retracted and depressed when you look at things like pressing movements. And some people say, yes, it certainly should. Some people say, no, it certainly shouldn't. And like the way I've always thought about it, it's like, well, if I'm trying to get the strongest bench possible and I've got 120 kilos or plus above my chest, if I can get myself as stable as possible by locking down my shoulder blades, then that would be pretty advantageous. But I'm also not doing every exercise for the exact same thing. I will then what else goes in the program to allow the shoulder blade to move how it should, to make sure that we don't end up with someone that's just locked down all the time and ended up have niggles. Like you said at the start, I'm not sure at the start of this podcast or before we got on, the answer's in the middle.
Yeah,
everything.
It's always in the middle. You got two sides of every story. Your side, my side, somewhere in the middle lies the truth. And so with the people who say that you don't want to set the scapula like that in a bench, I'll bet most of them have never had a decent bench. Like I can tell you, my best bench was around 218, and that's kilos, not pounds. So for the Americans, that's 480 or so, right? So you're getting into a position of inhalation and dissolve maneuver. The last thing you want to do is go into a position of exhalation and instability with weight that weighs more than most people squat. Like that's a terrible fucking idea. And furthermore, you're not really moving the bar far enough to worry about your scapula anyways, right? Because if you're benching competition, you're going to be trying to posteriorly rotate your thorax as much as you can while trying to get as much T-spine extension and get kind of on your neck. And you're actually trying to get most of your back off the bench. You want to get it as high as you can, even to the point of putting a Coke can underneath your back, so that your sternum and your esophageal process is high enough where you don't have to move the bar very far. So if you think about it, if you're in this position, you're not moving the bar far enough to fucking worry about your scapula. So who cares that you have your scapula set in depression and retraction? Like that's a stupid fucking argument to me. It's the same thing with elevation and depression and upward and downward rotation. If I'm doing partial range side laterals and I'm down here, I'm not even to a position where my scapula involved anyways, not till I get right here. So who cares if someone wants to lock it down? But the minute I come up here, I better start moving the scapula, because if I don't, I'm just going to be ramming that humerus right into the AC joint.
Yeah, I think it's a problem with like social media becomes, certainly in this realm, everything becomes sound bites. So it's like, everything has to be this way. It's like, well, if you look at this in context, in a program, we're looking at what, like 4 to 8, 9 exercises. Like you can do this way and this because I've got this here. That brings we're going on to sort of like the posture myth now. And like when we're looking at with that, what's your view on the trend of breath work at the moment? Because I think there's no doubt the impact that the diaphragm has on allowing the rib cage to move, allowing the thoracic to move. And again, allowing like external rotation. Doesn't happen if you can't move and extend that. But my thing with this is that you take so many breaths a day that it's like trying to be a one man pissing in the ocean, trying to make it yellow. Like, how much of an impact do you feel that we can change with breath work? How much does this play a part in your decision-making process with this?
Almost zero. Almost zero. You want me to teach you how to breathe? That's it. Look, I'm not opposed to the breathing things. I just think they've gotten a little too out of control and they've gone to an extreme. 10 years ago, well, not 10 years ago, maybe like 6-7 years ago, I was into the Wim Hof stuff, and I was into doing, apnea breathing and box breathing. And I think those things are really important, but they're getting to a point where they're getting out of control. And I was talking to Will Crozier about this, and he was at our gym in Brisbane, and we were hanging out, and he's done a lot of the breathing stuff. Went to America, did a lot of breathing stuff, and he goes, look, that stuff works really good from a rehab perspective when you have a small person that's in pain. He goes, I'm a big motherfucker and I squat almost 400 kilos. That stuff works good until I put 400 fucking kilos on my back. And then it doesn't work so good. And I said, well, I guess instead of you breathing into a balloon, you should just breathe into like a hot water bottle or some shit, like, because that's kind of what he was alluding to, are the systems where you're breathing into a straw or you're breathing into a balloon, and you're moving a leg here or an arm here, and you're pushing a leg into the wall. And I actually like a lot of that stuff, but it works well for Gen Pop. It works well for people who are weak. It doesn't work that great for people who are strong. So you need other things to do. Probably the stuff that I will do with breathing, I like the idea of learning how to do a lot of deep bracing breaths where you are like in a quadruped position, and then learning how to vacuum, and then learning how to expand, and then breathing against the expansion. And what I like about that is when you look into the upper part of the lumbar, a lot of that's attached into the diaphragm. So if we can work on pulling on the diaphragm, it pulls those vertebral segments up, which can decompress the lower spine. So we might use it for something like that.
That would also have the effects of like, because there's a fascial attachment to the psoas as well, right? So we talk about the force coupling and allowing that psoas to regain sort of length, rather than over length, and just sort of use things off on the pelvis.
Looking at where the psoas and also the QL come in and attach into the diaphragm and kind of in those top vertebral segments of the lumbar spine, and thinking about breathing so that you cause that expansion that pulls that, and it starts to relieve some of the nerves on the lower part of the lumbar spine in L4 and L5, which is where you're going to see a lot of the issues will be somewhere around L3, L4, L5 when you see like lower lumbar herniations. But what I find is that working on length tension and working on the brain as far as calming the brain down, utilizing things like PNF stretching, hard isometric stretching, isometric end range liftoffs, lengthened range lifts like split squats, pullovers, flies, looking at things like that of how can I reposition where my bone should be. Working on, for most people, posteriorly tilting their pelvis. When I get a client's photos in, the first thing I do is put the side pick up and I draw that plumb line. And then I've got a protractor app on my Mac. I draw lines from the ASIS to the PSIS, and I make like a little triangle. And then I see what's the degree of variance there. Most of the people I see are like 20 to 30 degrees of fucking anterior pelvic rotation. That should be about 5 to 10. And so if your hips are rotated that much, it's basically putting you in front of your feet. You're doing this. So what does the spine have to do to counteract that? Well, it's going to have to extend the lower back. So you've got anterior rotation with a really hard extended lower back. Well, now that's pushing your spine that way. So what has to happen? Well, my T-spine has to go into kyphosis to counterbalance that. And then what has to happen? Well, my head has to rotate and my neck has to go into more lordosis and forward head posture in order to keep my eyes on the horizon. So this is a whole chain reaction of shit that starts mainly at the hip. So if we can get control of the hip, we can control a lot of shit.
Yeah, yeah, that's something the way I've looked at for years and looked at people like you say yourself and Hassan and John Shallow. Like a lot of that sort of stuff comes in. It's like if you can get the hip in a good position, that often eases everything up. Certainly up the chain, but to a degree down the chain as well. Like I like knee block people with knee pain. Okay, let's sort the hip first, then I'll look at the foot. And if those two things can sort of sort out, you're not sitting in this internally rotated position all the time.
Yeah, and there's like you think about what's happening when you're sitting. You've got a lot of lower lumbar compression, and when you start looking at some of these muscular chains, I don't want to say fascial chains because people get really irritated when you say that. They either go, "Oh yeah, fascial chains, right on," or they go, "Fascial chains, fuck that bullshit." So I'll just say muscular chains where you're causing force coupling between muscles for locomotion or stability, or to create form closure in joints and things like that. So if you look at kind of that deep longitudinal line that runs from your like your erectors and your traps, and then down through the sacrum, and then across through the biceps femoris, a lot of sitting really fucks that up. So the minute you stand up and you go into anterior pelvic rotation, your femurs are going to go into internal rotation, which puts that biceps femoris at a state of length. It can't actually rotate or externally rotate your tibia. So if that happens, you're going to have internal rotation of tibia and collapsing arches. And the next thing you know, every time you squat, your knees cave in, they can't recover, your fucking back hurts. There's a lot of shit that can happen just from sitting 12 hours a day that for your feet that you wouldn't even think about that. So yeah, everything can work from the hips up, and definitely, and probably more importantly, hips down.
I think as well, you mentioned that about the bicep femoris being a state of length. And I think this is where you can change a lot of people's thinking in terms of like what's actually going on. I feel the word tightness is one of the most overused words, and people chronically stretching for hours and hours. I did it with a few of the guys I'm mentoring at the moment. I was like, right, I'm a prime example because my massive anterior top was just slowly sorting out, but I've never really been able to touch my toes. So I was like, I'm going to do a little experiment. Like, I'm not going to stretch a single hamstring. And I just did some hip thrusts. I just did some things to like get the hip flexor activated. And all of a sudden, I found that range. Then I did that horrible master release to get an extra few inches. But like, look at those things. Like, where's it? Like, what's your thoughts on the people coming in with like the word tightness? Like, what do you feel is actually going on when people feel a sensation of tight?
Well, I mean, for me, their body's searching for something, right? And most of the time it's trying to find a stable place, stable, safe area, because your body is inherently doesn't like pain. Like, pain is really important. Imagine if you didn't have pain and you stepped on a fucking rusty nail and you didn't know what was in there, and then you got a bacterial infection and you got septic and you fucking died, right? So you it's not that you don't want to feel pain, it's just you want to feel the appropriate amount of pain, and you want to recognize what that pain means. So when somebody feels a tight muscle, the first thing we have to distinguish is, okay, what is it tight or is it taut? Because those are two very different things. And if we want to think about that, if we think tight, is it short, or taut, is it long? Because the treatment pattern of what we might do might be completely different. So a lot of people with tight hamstrings, I would say the vast majority of them, they're not tight. They're tight because they're being pulled taut. They're being pulled to a long lengthened state, and they're having a hard time holding on. So it's going to make it feel like tight, even though that's not exactly what it is. So considering that your hips are rotated anteriorly, that takes your ischial tuberosity and moves it up this direction. Well, that's the origin of your semimembranosus tendinosus and your biceps femoris long head. And those are attached to biceps long heads attached to the fibula, and the other two are attached to your tibia. So as your hips start to rotate, well, that's going to affect your shin and how it rotates and how your foot rotates and how your ankle rotates. But as you rotate and pull the origin away from the insertion, that's pulling that into a state of length, which then gets tight. It's like having a guitar and you're tuning your guitar, and you keep tuning, and you're like, ding, 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 bong, and it breaks. Like you just keep tightening and tightening and tightening. It's not functioning correctly. So in that situation, we think, okay, this needs to be shortened actually, but it's not in a good mechanical position to create force. So what we have to do is, how do I put this muscle in a better resting position? Well, I've got to take the ischial tuberosity and bring it back towards its insertion points, which means I have to rotate the hip, which means the hamstring's not a great hip rotator. A better hip rotator is the glute and the obliques. So if I can focus on my glutes and my obliques, I can rotate that back normally and naturally, and I can use my hamstrings to anchor it to the lower limbs. But there's a lot of shit going on, right? We've got to look at the psoas. Is the psoas short, or is it tight or taut? Short or lengthened. What about the rec fem? All these things can pull the joints out of position. Could be sartorius.
If you look at the psoas, going back onto a little bit of the diaphragm stuff, we're looking at it as tight or taut. Would you look at rib cage position being the determining factor whether the psoas is actually tight or taut? If the rib cage is flared with that pelvic tilt, you probably find it's also an overly lengthened state.
No, because I think the ribs follow the hips. So, and here's the thing. Is it the psoas that's pulling everything down, or is it something else? That's the thing you got to think about. What's the best muscle? What's the muscle that has the greatest leverage to rotate your hips anteriorly?
Rotate my hips anteriorly. Probably the rec fem, I would have thought, right?
That's a good anchor point. That's a good anchor muscle, but this one has a more direct potential. It's a muscle no one ever gives any love to.
You looking at the sartorius?
Because that's a secondary hip flexor.
Yeah, so that's what I was thinking.
Iliacus.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, to it because you just think of this the psoas, right?
You think hip flexor, everyone says psoas, but then you go, okay, well, you've got the psoas, sartorius, secondary hip flexor, rec fem is a powerful hip flexor. So you go through all of these, and no one ever goes, what about the iliacus? Because it's attached to the inside of the hip, and no one ever thinks about it, right? But it attaches in the same place the psoas does. So, and it holds on the entire hip. So if you see this anteriorly, especially anteriorly as an inflare, the best muscle that could be pulling that would be the iliacus. Because if the psoas was pulling on anything, it's going to be ripping your lower back. So that's the one that's going to be ripping the shit out of your lower back, but that's not the one that's going to be ripping on your hip.
That makes a lot of sense, because if you look at the way that the fiber orientation of the psoas, you're probably looking more of a lumbar stabilizer than it really is a hip flexor, and that would make much more sense looking at that.
Yeah,
really interesting. Yeah.
Well, that is its number one job, is a lumbar stabilizer. And then the secondary jobs is as an extensor and a lumbar and a side flexor. And possibly you might even think a little bit of rotation too, or stabilization and rotation. But man, there's a lot of pretty cool things I've been looking at lately with that type of thing, and trying to think outside the box of what's really causing these problems. There's some stuff in the neck. I was looking at some old Paul Chek stuff about like the SCM obviously is a problem, and then the SCM is going to affect the left scap. You start looking at the scalenes. Then I started looking at the hyoid muscles, infra and suprahyoid muscles as neck flexors, and also as their relation in the tongue. And it's like I started looking at that as, and I think Paul Chek might have said this at some point, of looking at those hyoid muscles as kind of the psoas of the neck. And I started thinking about the occipitals as being the glutes of the skull, right? Because if you have this issue where your head's rotating, let's say you're losing flexion and you're starting to come into like forward head posture, you start thinking about what are the relationships of those small little muscles at the very top of the skull, and also what about the hyoid muscles that are coming through here and attached into the neck as pulling this down, and also extending your head back and being able to keep normal position of the head. Now I'm still junky with it because I've only been thinking about this for the last 3 weeks, but it makes a lot of sense because everything's going to rotate. So, and everything pretty much rotates almost in the same way. So the hips rotate very similar to the glenohumeral joints. And that rotates very similar to how the head rotates on the axis, the atlas.
That's really interesting. If you want, when you learn some of this stuff, if you want a guinea pig for that stuff, I'm probably an absolute.
Yeah, 100%.
Like it's because it was, when certain things you start listening to things, you go, okay, I'm starting to see some of the issues that I have. Like for a while, so like I always find that like every now and again I feel almost like I'm almost got like swollen glands, and I'm like, not ill though. There's nothing going on here, and I was getting worried about it for a while. But it almost literally like that. Like it feels like that is incredibly tight all of a sudden around here. And I also find that like if I rotate back, that's where a lot of my upper back pain comes from. So I reckon there's a lot in that can potentially be a lot of root cause of issues around my neck. So that's really interesting.
Well, this will blow your mind. Because I have a lot of clients with Hashimoto's, and I was talking to Amanda, which you've seen me post her online a lot, and Hashimoto's, and I think she's lost 30 something kilos by now. And we've been straightening her back, but her neck is still there. We're still trying to fix that. It's gotten so much better, but we got a long road. When I was going through this hyoid muscles, which I was basically researching it for her, there's a lot of thyroid muscles, or the hyoid muscles in relation to the thyroid. And I'm thinking, okay, so when somebody has Hashimoto's and the brain starts sending out more TSH in order to get the thyroid to create more thyroid hormones, what does the thyroid do? Well, it hypertrophies. Okay, well, if it's hypertrophying to the point where a doctor can palpate and tell that it's too big, what's that doing to the muscles that cross it? Is it possible that they're pulling those muscles to a state of length and destabilizing them? So I don't know. This is the type of shit that keeps me up at night. But it makes sense that if that was dysfunctional and pushing on nerves or pushing on muscles and moving them into places they weren't supposed to be, or into links they weren't supposed to be, that could destabilize them. And if those neck flexors get destabilized, the SCM has to work harder. What does that do? Shortens, pulls you into forward head posture.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I'm with you on these things. Sort of like keep me up. I'll be getting my anatomy out as soon as we finish this. I remember the one that always blew my mind. And I was speaking this about Tom Hibbert. He came up with a solution. I wonder if you have an idea of it as well. That I went to. Have you done Be Activated, Douglas Hill?
No, but I've done RPR, which is like Be Activated light.
Yeah, like incredibly. It was a really weird seminar because it was so ridiculously painful. Like you got to the end of it, and go, I'm so interested. I want it to continue, but I'm so fed up of being prodded in my diaphragm that I just want to go home. There was this one guy that came in, and I generally would have thought it was a plant, unless I saw this with my eyes and spoke to the guy. But he came in, he had glasses on, he was blind in one eye. And he got him up, and Doug's always managed to get right people up for the right demonstrations. And he starts playing around with his serratus anterior, just like digging his thumb into his serratus anterior and around the rib cage and this sort of thing. And then he realized every time we go into his blind spot, he'd flinch. So he just slowly kept working, And he got up and he went, starting to see blurs in my eye. So he kept working. The next day he came in without his glasses on. I'm just like, what? And like that fuels, like any knowledge I have on anatomy now is almost entirely fueled by that. I was just like, I want to know. Yeah. Eventually I'll get Douglas on. I'm going to ask him directly what's going on here and see if he knows. But like that, just like, what?
Yeah, that's weird. I don't know, man. I mean, you got to wonder if that was a plant or whatever, but fuck, who knows? I've seen some crazy shit. I'll tell you a couple of Charles stories, because the funny thing is, like, a lot of the people that didn't know Charles talk a lot of shit about him, but the people who knew him and saw the shit would be like, honestly, if I hadn't seen this with my eyes, I wouldn't have fucking believed it. So I remember one of the first biosigs that I was an assistant coach on. So this was back in probably 2000, maybe 2009. We were in Arizona. And so Charles was big in the muscle testing at that point. Not the muscle testing I teach you guys in program design, like not manual muscle testing, but muscle testing, like applied muscle testing, where you put something in the hand and then you test and see if you get strong or weak or whatever. So it's kind of some hoodoo voodoo shit, right? And he, at one point, he brought his testing kit and he tested a girl and said, "Oh, you're deficient in zinc," right? And we're like, whatever. I'm sitting in the back of the class with Derek Witzke. I'm like, well, that's a crock of shit. And so he pulls out a vial of zinc and puts it on a Chapman reflex point on her sternum. And he tells her to take her hands and do this with them in front of her chest. Now, okay, someone's like this, they're really strong. If you internally rotate that, you have no fucking strength. A child could move your hands apart. She does like this, and he takes his arm and he puts it underneath her arms and he lifts her off the table. And he's just holding her. She's like this, his arm's in here. He lifts her off the table. No one could hold that position. I don't care how fucking strong you are. You could be the world's strongest man. No way you could hold that position. But for some reason, he lifted her completely off the table and held her there for a good 3 or 4 seconds. And said, "Okay, you need zinc." And I was like, what the fuck? And yeah, there was one time, and I don't like telling the story much because I always sound like a fucking, like one of those guys, ghost whisperer type of weirdos, right? So it was me and Charles Andre and the rest of the class. And this is in Rhode Island. And Charles was telling a story about how, like, since he was a child, he's been on the pursuit of learning how to harness chi energy. And we're like, okay, chi energy, cool. Like, Qi Gong and fucking Tai Chi shit. Cool. Dragon Ball Z, whatever. And so he's talking about this and how he's been to different countries, finding masters and things. And, it's Charles telling a Charles story. And Andre looks at us and goes, "No, it's true. Like, he's actually learned how to do this." And we're like, okay, he's paying Andre to just bullshit us. So they were telling us stories about how, like, somebody's doing pull-ups and they're like struggling, and Charles touches them and puts chi energy into them. All of a sudden, they just keep repping it out, right? They're telling us like fantastic stories like this, and we're all thinking they're full of shit. And so Charles goes, "Here, I'll prove it to you." And he brings a guy out that couldn't have been more than maybe 175, 180 pounds. And he goes, "All right, stand there and put your arm out." And he gets another guy about my size. This guy's like 225 pounds or so. He goes, I want you to grab his arm and pull it down." So of course the guy's like this, he's doing a side lateral, and the other guy pulls his arm down. No problem. Charles says, "Okay." So Charles grabs the guy's other wrist and holds on to it. He goes, "Pull his arm down now." And so the guy goes, and he couldn't pull his arm down. And Charles goes, "Hang from his arm." So the guy and it picks his legs. He's hanging 225 pounds. He's hanging from the guy's arm. Charles lets go, and they both fall to the ground. And I went, "That's it. I'm done. It's enough reality." It was the weirdest thing I've ever seen. And at that point, I knew that Charles said a lot of stuff that he was quite full of shit on, but there was a lot of shit he knew that no one would ever fucking believe, and he was spot on about it.
Yeah. And that's sort of stuff's fascinating. It makes you, like, you ever get bogged down in sort of like the stuff that we learn and just about, like, abs and squats and bicycle curls, like realizing the possibilities in this sort of stuff. Like, it's something that when I first moved out here, I was like, I'm going to find some, like, really cool, interesting people. There's people doing Tai Chi with swords in the park here. In US, Australia, UK, that would be a felony, carrying a sword into Victoria.
Yeah.
Here, there's 80-year-old grandma doing this sort of stuff, and I was like, never done it.
Not in the US, because it's legal to carry a sword around in the US, so, or at least in Texas.
Of course. Like, why am I not surprised? But yeah, like,
you could literally have a katana and 2 fucking 6-shooters on your waist, walking down the street in Texas. No one can say a word to you.
That's mental. We could get on another ad about gun laws in America. If you ever want to do a round 2 about something non-fitness related, just say the word. I'll happily do it for hours about that.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah. My path to taking down Joe Rogan, I've got to not do more than just training stuff eventually.
Yeah.
But
for sure.
Yeah, like that's the thing. I moved out here. I was like, I'm going to try and learn some of this stuff. I've not really like tipped the surface on it. But it's definitely being in this part of the world. I'm definitely going to learn some of the weird sort of stuff you sort of get with here.
Yeah.
Get more foot massages, find more Reiki, that sort of stuff.
I thought it was cool, man. I've only been in Hong Kong one time, and it's not somewhere I could live. I couldn't live there. It's too crazy. It's too loud and too wild. But man, it was a cool place to visit. Like walking through the markets and some of the restaurants there. Some of the best food I've ever had. Probably some of the best Asian food I've ever had. I went to this. I think it was a 3 Michelin star place. So what happened was I did a foundation seminar there, and Zoe decided in the middle of us traveling, I miss the dogs, I'm going home. So she changed her ticket and went home. So I was by myself for about a week in Hong Kong, and I was like, all right, cool. So I just went to like Michelin star restaurants and did all this cool shit. So I was like, all right, that's all right. But man, I like Hong Kong. I went to what's the electronics place you can get all the really, it's like 4 or 5 level place. You can go buy like camera shit and electronics real cheap.
I don't know the name of it, but there's loads of places like that around Causeway Bay.
Yeah, because I wanted to get a DSLR to start doing like photography, and they were like, oh, you got to go to this place. And I went in. It's like you get shit so cheap. I'm like, who'd you rob for that? Well, I don't care. I don't know him here. Here's $200. Give me a fucking Canon D80 or whatever. But
it's a mad contrast here as well. Like, you know, I always, when I looked at, I always judge a place, certainly in Europe, by the price of beer. Whatever a pint is tends to show the tax and shows what it is. Whereas here, the tax is low, but it's the rent's so astronomically high that if a place is a restaurant, you'll probably get a beer for like £3. If you go to, you know, somewhere that serves primarily alcohol, it'd be like £10, £11 because they've got to make their rent with this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
You mentioned food, and this is really interesting. Like food here is it's the most varied you can ever get. You'll get swanky Michelin star restaurants. You'll get canteens that are Michelin star that where you just do good steamed pork buns. And I'll never forget, because I don't think Mr. Jordan Shallow will potentially agree with you on that food statement, because he came to Hong Kong and he did his pre-skit level 1 with us, and one of my mates loved this tiny little Thai restaurant called Little Thai Hut. And like it's probably about the size of my kitchen, which is it's like one person width, right? And he's a big dude. So the first problem was trying to get this dude in through the door, which was a challenge in itself. And then we're going, have two eggs, which is the pad krapao, like minced beef, couple of eggs, bit of chili, load of rice, awesome. But no, he wanted 2 portions of the chicken with rice, and he had a glass of water. And he couldn't, he was his mind was blown that the water was warm and the chicken was cold. Welcome to Hong Kong, like,
yeah,
we do it here.
I don't know, man. I mean, I had all the meals I had there were great. Like here's the thing. I love when I go to a new country, I like going to McDonald's because there's always a different menu in every country. And Hong Kong's got some wild ass shit. They got like black buns with crazy shit on their menu. So I had Mickey D's. I think I love Pizza Express, a fucking British special. Love Pizza Express. I got one in Hong Kong. I ate that place like twice. The only thing I don't like about Hong Kong is Chinese people are judgy as fuck. So I'd sit there, I go to Pizza Express, and the lady come out and ask me what I want, and I'd order a pizza, order some breadsticks, order some wine. I'm eating. I get done. She comes back, gives me my bill. I'm like, no, I'm not done yet. I get another one of those pizzas, some more breadsticks, some more wine. And she's like, oh, so much food. Oh, are you sure? I'm like, yeah. She's like, oh, that's lots of calories. I'm like, yeah, I'm a big motherfucker. I'm like, Godzilla, bring my goddamn pizza, man. But that's the only thing I found. Like they don't understand how much like a big white dude can eat.
Yeah. I never thought I'd miss British customer service. I didn't think that was something I'd ever miss. But like with here, people don't look at you. The change is thrown at you. You give them a note, they just throw money back at your face. Like, how do you find
yeah. Do you find that in Hong Kong? You find that's the case?
Yeah, they're just.
Okay.
I think it's efficiency. I don't think they're trying to be rude. They're just trying to serve as many customers as humanly possible. So they just throw stuff at you. Go move.
Look, but I want to. Where do you miss service from? Where have you
I
lived that you miss service?
mean, well, I tell you what. I think the. It's I
But
never thought this was a thing.
don't say the UK. Don't say the UK.
I
Ain't no
think
service there.
I think the UK.
Ah,
I think the UK is a perfect balance between if Hong Kong's miserable and just trying to get you out the door, American people are just like, it's 7 o'clock in the morning. Please don't try and make me have the nicest day in the world. Like this wonderful balance of I'm a bit miserable, but I'll be polite about it. That's where my
okay, but okay. All right, we got to dissect this. Okay, all right, because I'm a world traveler and I know these. I tell you what, because America tipping culture, great service most of the time, not always, most of the time, because their paychecks are dependent on it. Fucking the UK service, what the fuck is that? Australia is even worse. Like you go to Australia, you walk in, you go to the bar, order your food, you sit down, the server brings you your food, and that's all they do. Like they don't do anything. They don't refill your fucking cups. They don't ask you how your food is. Like none of that shit. Like Zoe, when we first started dating, she didn't understand the whole tipping thing until she came to America and she was like, God damn, like you finish a Diet Coke and a server comes up and refills it for free. No questions asked. You fucking they put the food down, the server comes out and goes, how was your meal? And you're like, that was fantastic. Thank you. You go, it wasn't that great. And they're like, okay, I'll talk to my manager if I can give you a free dessert. The service that you get in America is so much different because of the tipping, because the people want you to be happy. Man, you go overseas, they don't give a fuck because they're getting minimum wage, $25 an hour. They don't give a shit if you like your meal or not. Oh, it drives me crazy.
I think Dubai is I went there recently. The interesting one was like they're almost halfway to America in that sense that they're trying to, but it's all about TripAdvisor. Like you go to a restaurant and they're literally forcing you write a review and they're looking over you, going, make sure you put my name. And I was like, whoa, okay, yeah. that was weird, but yeah, the service is great.
You know what? I don't think I've ever had bad service in the Middle East, and I think it's a cultural thing. I think there's a pride in taking care of their people and that type of thing. And I've heard the same thing about Japan. Like people go to Japan, they're like, man, they're crazy nice here, like almost to the point where it's over the top. But I find the same in the Middle East. Whenever I go to Dubai or Kuwait, man, the service there is ridiculous. It's like and you're not paying them extra. It's not like you're tipping them. There's just an actual pride in my job. Like I'm a server. I'm gonna be the best motherfucking server in the whole wide world. And I'm your server today. And I'm like, I appreciate that.
Yeah. How did you find the taxi drivers here in Hong Kong?
I don't think I ever took a taxi.
God, I mean, if you're an adrenaline junkie, to tell you what, you're holding on for dear life. The suspension isn't much there, and they just put their foot down. And half the time, they have no idea where they're going.
Okay, so my experience with that is New York. You go to New York, it's the same thing, but they know exactly where they're going. But you're like, holy shit. But I like that because I like roller coasters and I like dangerous adrenaline stuff. So when I go to New York, I almost want to put my hands out the car like a roller coaster. I'm like, yeah, woo! Oh shit, that's a garbage truck.
It's amazing how I wonder how some of these people became special. And talk about people being slightly rude in Hong Kong. I do think that taxi drivers will deliberately be a bit ignorant, pretend they don't know where they're going if you don't speak Cantonese. Sometimes.
Yeah.
So I came out of a bar once and I was like, I'm meeting Ellie's family at the Peak Lookout restaurant, which is like on the Peak, like the biggest tourist attraction really in Hong Kong other than the harbour, right? And so I got in and I was like, could I go to the Peak Lookout restaurant? Huh? Peak Lookout restaurant. Shook his head. I went, Peak Road. Where? On the Peak. It's like, you couldn't have a descriptive where to go. And then I started driving off. He hands me a phone with someone who speaks apparently better English, going, driver doesn't understand. And I went through this whole rigmarole with her. He still dropped me a mile down the road. And it was just, I just think it was just like, apparently English ways to say the roads, there's Cantonese way to say the roads, and there's like English versions of the Cantonese way to say the road.
All right. Well, again, I'll play devil's advocate. How long have you been there?
2 years.
That's plenty of time for you to get halfway through learning Cantonese and Mandarin.
I do agree with you. Yeah.
I'll tell you straight up, like, I firmly believe when you move to another country, then you must assimilate into their society. So if I was Mexican, I came to America, I'd be doing my best to learn English. If I'm a Texan moving to Australia, I've learned easy learning curve, their lingo. It's pretty easy. You just drop the end off and add an O to everything and you're pretty sweet. But I've always been of the opinion that if I move to a country and it's English is my primary language, it's not theirs, I'm going to probably learn their culture and try to learn their language, right? And I think for me, it's a matter of respect and also easy getting through the community and being able to talk to them correctly in the way they understand. One time when Zoe and I we were traveling, I think we were going to Ireland. I can't remember where we had been. I think we had been in America doing seminars. We were going to the Irish Strength Institute.
Yeah.
But we ended up going through, I think, Norway. I think it was Norway. So we did a night in Norway, and I was like, well, if we're going to go a night, let's do like 24 hours so we can kind of see a little bit of Norway. So we flew in, and they lost my luggage. So I had no fucking clothes. So we had to go into the city and buy at least enough clothes, like a couple of outfits before we went to Ireland, and I could buy some more shit. So we went downtown. It was the weirdest thing ever. We went downtown. There were people everywhere. You could hear a fucking pin drop. And I'm talking, there were hundreds of people out, and you'd feel more comfortable whispering to somebody because your voice would carry so far. And whenever I go to a country like that, I always read through what's is it Happy Planet or whatever the fuck it is. One of those travel things. I want to read about the culture and what should I do and not do. And I don't want to offend anybody, that type of shit. And one of the things it said about the Scandinavian countries is that if you're loud, like me, they automatically assume you're drunk, and you don't want that. So I went to there. It's like, I'm going to use my inside voice, like my very private voice. And we went downtown, and it was like fucking ghost pin drop. So we go into this sports store, and I hear this loud motherfucker just like, and it's an American accent. And Zoe goes, is that American or Canadian? I go, that's Californian. And sure enough, the guy was a guy from California that had moved to Norway. And so we started talking to him, and he was like, yeah, how's the process of going to this country? He goes, that's pretty sweet, man. Like, I got a job, this, that. He goes, within the first 2 years, I have to learn how to speak their language. He goes, that's probably like the biggest hurdle because that language is apparently hard as fuck. But I think that's the right thing to do, right? If you're going to immigrate into somebody's other country, then you need to abide by their laws, and you need to abide by their culture, and you need to abide by their language.
I think I picked up a little bit. It's a very, very difficult language to learn. I think it's one of the things that's like, we're deciding what we do over the next few years based off whether we can go home and see family. Yeah. Who knows in this year? But if we extend for another year, like, I'm gonna actually start doing some lessons or something where I can actually learn it. So I'm at home, I'll get overwhelmed with it. I just no chance. I'll get distracted. Like, going back to what was said at the start of the episode. Yeah. No,
look, it's a hard fucking language, man, because you're one intonation off making somebody agreeable or them wanting to fucking stab you in the throat, right? So I'll tell you two quick stories on that. Like, one of my best friends, we've known each other since we were 19. She's Chinese American. And I would go over to have dinner with her family, and they were all either born in China or first generation Americans. And so we go to dinner, and they'd all be sitting there, and I'm like the big token white dude, and they're all like, talking Chinese and shit. And I'm just like, yeah, cool. Like, I was talking, you all motherfuckers all speak English. I don't speak Mandarin, so I don't know why you guys are speaking Mandarin. And it's funny because they would all talk and they'd laugh and they'd look at me to try to include me into it. And they'd be like, ha ha ha, ha. And I'd be like, ha ha, motherfuckers. Yeah, but you laughing at me? And then my friend was like, no, they're trying to include you in conversation. I'm like, well, you could probably include me if you all spoke English. That would be real fucking easy. But I decided I was going to try to learn how to speak Chinese. So I bought Pimsleur, which this is 20 something years ago. So it was like a little fucking tape you put in your cassette tape, you slide it in the thing. And I remember I was driving my truck and I was trying to repeat the words. And after about 15 minutes, I just ejected the thing and threw it out the fucking window. I was like, I'm never going to learn this shit. It could happen. But a good friend of mine he used to own the largest sunglass company in America. So he decided, he was a designer, and he decided he was going to go to China and he was going to figure out how to get sunglasses made. And so could not speak a lick of Chinese, flew over, got a fucking apartment and started trying to talk to the guys at the factories. And he taught himself how to speak Chinese. And at one point they asked him to speak in front of a high school graduation. And so he was up there and he was speaking Chinese. And apparently at one point, his intonation was just slightly off. And instead of saying something like, may you all be successful, he said something like, go suck your mom's goat ass or something. And some dude walks out of the back. He's like, oh, you can't say that. You cannot say that. And he's like, what? He was like, look, nobody say anything. They're speechless. He was like, no, that's not why they're speechless. And they had to pull him off stage.
Yeah, like in Cantonese, it's even tougher than Mandarin. It's like 9 dialects. So like the margin for error is huge.
Yeah,
absolutely huge.
They should just be like people who speak English and use like 18 different words that mean the same fucking thing in different contexts, like there, and there, and where, and effect and effect, and just makes it even worse.
Yeah, but I say like English isn't an easy language either. Like I'm quite glad that I learned that with all the things that was exactly the same. Like, well, my other half is a primary school teacher, and she I never get. I don't know what they do like in Australia or in the US, but here they teach phonics, so they spell out everything phonetically, and it's great until you have an accent. I remember he was talking about these kids where she had to mark them that they were right, but she was trying to get them to spell fire. Right, but rather than I-R-E, because they're from Birmingham, they spelled it F-I-Y-A, because and technically in phonics it's right because it's fire.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I was like, okay, well, this is a drawback here.
And I think phonics must be an American thing, because if you go to the UK, you go to Australia, they don't say fire like that, they say fire. Yeah. So it's like technically it does sound like it would be spelt that way.
Yeah, I never used it at school. It's definitely a relatively new thing since I was at school many years ago.
I've started to speak that way, which I'm starting to get lazy R's, and the longer I spend over here. And I went back to the US, and Zoe and I was in a taxi or an Uber, and the guy asked me if I was from Australia, and I'm like, what the fuck?
Oh, I get that when I go home. I remember one time I was at university and I got speaking to a guy from Warsaw, which is not too far from my neck of the woods. And I've never had a particularly thick black country accent, but I left him myself at the time because he goes, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. He goes, I was scared. You didn't sound like you, because I just slipped in without knowing it back into like, you were pet, how are you doing? And like, absolutely terrible. Cool. So, I mean, I could chat and rant away with you all night. I'll definitely look at some point getting on for round 2 and maybe chat completely non-training stuff. But thank you very much for your time. For anyone who doesn't know where to find Luke, where can people find Luke?
You can find me at 3 Roma. Oh, never mind. Get my fucking address out. Don't do that. So Muscle Nerds _health on Instagram. If you like memes, and you won't bother me about business stuff, my Instagram is Luke Leaman, Leaman, and that's purely a meme account. And then on Facebook, obviously Muscle Nerds, but fuck, nobody uses Facebook anymore. It's too much discussion on Facebook, not enough just scrolling pictures. So people don't actually use We don't have a fucking TikTok, so don't ask. I don't do stupid, crazy dances and shit. Yeah, that's about it. I mean, if people want to inquire about coaching or education consults, mentorship, stuff like that, info@musclenurse.net, which is also our webpage. So we don't have the best webpage in the world. We're just kind of working on it, but it has enough information to find us and all that shit.
I can definitely vouch for the memes are good. You have a big knack of finding good memes every week.
Oh, that's my next calling. If Muscle Nerds doesn't work out, I'm just gonna move into the professional meme lord category and just do that.
Yeah, I definitely got a calling for it there. And well, and I suppose the last thing, a place where people can find you if they're local to your area, is the gym. Are you guys coming out?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the Institute of Physical Performance, and that is in Banyo. So BANYO. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'll chat soon.